So then we are back with more understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find in the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end per Yeshayahu the prophet. We find then the layer of understanding of the time of restoration, regarding then the time from 2009 and onwards until 2032 maximum. We understand the spring feast was 490 days precisely, so as the autumn feast 490 days. Why? Because half of the prophets and the law were completed, and then the other half not yet. However, prior of the starting of the autumn feast, let's understand then the base of the statue of Daniel, and understand then the kingdom of the east, the kingdom of the north, and the kingdom of the south. Let's then make sure we understand how then these kingdoms are relating with each other versus then the rest of governments. Firstly, we started then with a neutral point, freighters. A freighter can be related with any country anywhere at any time. They do have the purpose of tracking and transportation. That's the main work of freighting. With it, when we mix then government, we understand that there is a lining up of the system with the freighting and then governments. Governments are going to be nearly non-existing, other than the kingdom of the east, kingdom of the north, and kingdom of the south. So then, as we understand, the North Koreans are lining up themselves with the Chinese. We understand the USA at some point they are going to remove the sanctions from North Korea. Thus far, we understand North Korea is in the hands of the Chinese. And then we are obviously retrieving to get our economy straightened out. There is no question regarding this point. So let's understand then the rest of it. As the Asia market, then they are uniting themselves, obviously, because we find then the system coming from the east comes from the Pacific and then becomes neutral from nation to nation around the world. You have to have the unity of the Asian market. In the United States, they don't belong anymore over there with the Asian market, other than understanding the future system coming. Thus far, our economy is in shambles. Unemployment is big. The government became a monstrosity. It can't maintain itself. So let's understand then from the viewpoint of freighting. Understandably, the Chinese then are in charge of the Asia market, including North Korea. So we're going to find then the Chinese, more power to the Chinese regarding the Asia market. There are some responsibilities they have to deal with, such as nuclear threat amongst the Asia market. The Chinese have to find a way to get this resolved. It's obvious. Then we find, obviously, then also the Kingdom of the North. Mr. Putin then refurbishing the Soviet Union. It's very plain and clear. Because when we read Daniel the 11th chapter, you find the Kingdom of the North not only understanding the former, but then we find the later or the last status of the northern kingdom then higher than the first. Very easily understandable. So what can we expect? Skirmishes from United States and also the Soviet Union. You can expect the escalation of problems from the Soviet Union and United States. It's absolutely obvious. In this time, the Soviets, they're going to get their way. Because we don't find the West, the 11th chapter of Daniel. You find the North, you find the South, and you find the East. The East is found in a couple of chapters later. The situation regarding Baal and dragon later should explain what those mean in the spirit. So then, since the West is not part of the 11th chapter of Daniel, then the increasing of skirmishes from Soviet Union must then start, and already did. And this time they're going to have their way. So then let's understand what's coming, because then we can prepare ourselves to get our country, United States, then straightened out as far as the economy is concerned, and how we are going to deal with the world's market. So far we are not prepared. We are sticking our noses where we shouldn't. We are being laughed at because there are people from this country with the high elevated positions making themselves stupid before other nations, because we don't understand yet the main bulk of the trade of the future. We understand we came from industrialized bases of the 50s and 60s, but then from then on was a gradual going down. Then as we then remove ourselves from the world's market for then rebuilding, then when the system becomes available, then we can be part of it. So then, let's understand the BRICS, understand the most important position at the moment regarding then the Soviet Union. They have the forward motion. It's very clear. You have the East already prepared. The system is the factory of the world. They have their way. They have the forward motion regarding the market. Then we find regarding the preparation of the Kingdom of the North as the planners. The East is taken care of. However, the East is overburdened with a lot of projects at the same time. Comes then the Kingdom of the North. Comes the understanding of Mr. Putin owning the kingship of the Kingdom of the North. Read Daniel the 11th chapter. This truly is it, because considering the prophecy and the time given, we have roughly 20 years. So when you understand the later section of the 11th chapter, you find then the Northern Kingdom already a military power. And when the scripture states with much equipment, means a lot. You have to have industry. And this industry then is refurbished from what was previously. So let's understand then the 11th chapter of Daniel, because relates with the Kingdom of the North as kingdom, then the removal of the Kingdom of the North, but then returning and higher than the former. So then they have the ownership of the Kingdom of the North. As they own these status, then they start leading the BRIC, or the BRICS. Then we find the rebuilding of the Soviet Union. However, we find in the Soviet Union at the moment, obviously, the Chinese, they must have more energy. So in exchange for this energy of, for instance, natural gas and petroleum, then the Chinese granted them the selector of plans, or the planners. So then this removes the hand of the Chinese with so many diplomacies with so many nations. Some of them are direct, some of them are not direct. Some of them they have to deal with religion, not part of a trade, but yet mixed up. The Soviets, they know how to deal with this section of those nations related with religion. China is pure trade. But sometimes when you involve pure trade with religious nations, then becomes mixed up with uneasy situations. And it's very uncomfortable. However, the Soviets, they know how to deal with it. So then, as they are the leaders of the BRICS, obviously, he takes the leadership, Mr. Putin, takes the leadership of the BRICS and get his northern kingdom rebuilt in exchange for forwarding plans, 100% plans. This means they provide China with energy. In exchange for this, they become the planners. In exchange, they provide equipment for the southern kingdom to get the minerals required to get those projects selected from many nations to get those put into production. They calculate what it takes of transportation, calculate what it takes as far as mining, and they get to deal 100% as the starting of a flow. That's the rebuilding of the northern kingdom. Then we find Africa at some point discovering its ancient times and then selecting a representative of their own. But the engine must start flowing because the time is very short. This engine of the system of the Chinese must start rotating. In other words, then you have mining, very easy doing, only providing then the robust equipment to get the ores out of the mines. Gets to the port, gets to the ships, and then is taken to a factory. But these understandings must go then through the northern kingdom, the planners. Either go ores from the mines straight to China, smeltering, or they decide to have smeltering someplace else. Then China only receives those materials already refined, making it easier to get the production going. Then, during this time of 36 months, then there is a time of testing these flowing areas. By the time the system then is grounded, in other words, is very solid, then time for the expansion of the system throughout the world. So there is not a moment of wasting. The East, China has the obligation, obviously, to maintain the peninsula over there quiet. For this to take place, we, United States, we have to get out of there. As we remove from there ourselves, then we find China leading the Asian market. This is what they should be doing anyway. North Korea is an Asian country. They are in the midst of the Asian market. And we understand the system is coming from the East. It is obvious. Then we at home, we must do our homework. We have to find out what goes on with our economy and then lining up with the freighters. Make sure we have instant taxation system then in exact standards the next 36 months. Until the main engine of the system, then Kingdom of the North, East and South, then they are relating with each other. So do we understand what's coming? In the skirmishes with the Soviet Union, United States, they're going to escalate. They must escalate. So we find in then the de-escalation of North Korea and the Asian countries uniting themselves stronger, and then we find the escalation of United States problems with the Soviet Union. Because the Soviets are returning, liking it or not. Read then the 11th chapter of Daniel. Then the Kingdom of the North would be then stronger than the former, with much equipment. Much equipment we can only understand in understanding only. We have to link a kingdom with a freighting. When the Messiah spoke, Galah 1:8, he spoke of the freighters of the earth. He did not say Kingdom of the North, South or East. He spoke of freighters. By this time, the system is so nicely rotating, so nicely greased up, you can say, that then the system is working as a unit. But the obvious is Then, the Northern Kingdom providing energy to China in exchange for being the planners. Then the planners, they filter through what is required, but they provide the heavy-duty equipment for the South. Only provide them with the equipment and let them do their work. Either then the Northern Kingdom decides to have ores straight to China or smeltering someplace else, at their choice. Because the scripture does not relate to how it gets done. It only relates at the end. But since we understand China is going to have a lot of more work to do because of the worldwide expansion of their system, it's very obvious. The ores must go someplace else, gets smelted, and then China receives the final product. Or then the metals are already refined, making it easier. How it was going to get done from nation to nation, we don't know. Depends upon the Northern Kingdom. So the whole extra countries of this planet, they have to flow through the Northern Kingdom. So then we understand why the Soviet Union is going to become then great as more than previously. Thus then the 11th chapter makes sense before your very eyes. So then the other countries can expect in a very short time they won't be able to go straight to China anymore because of the volume coming. When the system becomes available for other nations, the volume is going to be the utmost, and they have to deliver what they promised. Then they have to start, regulating their time. So then they entrust the planner to make sure, verify there is enough materials to get this job done, verify the transportation, verify then if this can be done or not. So the Northern Kingdom filters through, and then China only receives the final project. Production itself. But for these to take place, so then we are on the same page as far as down the 11th chapter, the United States must retrieve from the world's market as we used to be in the past. Then we have to do our homework. That's why in the next 36 months we must stabilize our subsystem. If we don't do this, more and more skirmishes from the north is the normal factor of lining up the market for the future. But the way it works is this: the more we insist, the worse it gets. Because the layout was already given last year. If we would have only retrieved from the war of Israel and the Palestinians, we would have a say-so over there in the region. The Chinese already would be doing patrol on those areas. No, we decided to purchase the war. We got ourselves in trouble. So let's understand then the 11th chapter and let it be. Let the Northern Kingdom be the Northern Kingdom, the East be the East, and the South be in the South. The United States has no condition of war anymore, no condition of finances. We were given from IMF 2 years ago 5 years maximum. We have 36 months left, and time is counting. We've got to get our subsystem. We are no longer the system. The U.S. monetary system is no longer a system, it is a subsystem. We are insisting in a system that is no longer a system, but a subsystem. That's why the time of the U.S. system is counted. It became a subsystem when IMF came out with a report. You have 5 years to get this straightened out. Already became a subsystem. So So let's understand that Chinese yen is going to be the next. That's why there are direct links from China with the realm of Australia, with the realm of New Zealand, with South Africa. They're already doing this. So let's understand and find our position so then we don't become even further ridiculous. Because we in America, we are ridiculous. We don't understand our position anymore. The Secretary of State went to South Korea, he was laughed at his face. People were laughing at him because he doesn't have a place. He doesn't understand that the North Koreans, they don't want a war. But they want the sanctions lifted from them. So let's make sure we find a deal where then the Chinese becomes a bit more influential and help their Asian friends to become part of their market. It's normal and plain and simple. But let the Chinese handle the situation. They have to handle the situation on their part of the world. We've got enough problems of our own. And then obviously in exchange for these, then the escalation of the problems with the Soviet Union. It is very normal. Because our system, we are not doing the homework. And in order for the 11th chapter of Dan to become a reality, has to have more skirmishes so then we can retrieve and do our homework. It doesn't mean that we are incapable people, but we have not found ourselves our position yet. And our position at the moment was the same as last year, is retrieving. For the purposes of rebuilding. So we can expect our relationship with the Soviet Union to deteriorate very badly until we understand and we are out of their way. And let the Kingdom of the North be the Kingdom of the North. They are in charge of the BRICS. And do what they must do. They are the planners. And then we at home, we do our homework, make sure we have our subsystem then lined up. Lean up our government, lean up our system. So then when we become, then the subsystem, when the system becomes available, then we understand we are part of a team. So please stay tuned, much more coming up.